宇宙について一般的な意味で話してきたと思うんですけど、このモデルにおける宇宙は何を意味しますか？
ゲームの中の人生？
現実と区別のつかないほどよくできた仮想現実ってわけだ。
Well, if we are living inside the matrix, then all of this is a computer simulation. This means that there's a programmer, but it also suggests that there is a purpose. As a starting point, let us suppose that this purpose involves us. Our physical universe then becomes the stage against which this theatre of life is played out, with us as the principal actors in this great game. I think we can call it a great game because, of course, it is, for us, a matter of life and death. We can then look for evidence of recurring themes that drove our history in the context of this great game thesis, which might give clues to the purpose of the game. In the previous discussion, I used the example of a battle between good and evil. For this scenario, we would have this good and evil dualism conflict within us as individuals, but then also played out amongst humanity at large.
もし私がこのグレートゲームの単なるコマであるとしたら、どうして私はそのゲームをプレイすることになっているのか、どっち側が勝つのか負けるのかを気にしないといけないのは何でですか？
Well, there is an example of a great game being played out in front of us now. We can call it COVID-19. It has a virus as the backdrop and the stage. And so whether we like it or not, we are trapped within this theatre. If this universe is a simulation, then it was presumably programmed for a purpose, although that purpose is unclear. We cannot escape this game, but must instead play it out until the end. We have no choice. To play or not to play is not the question. Traditionally, the idea of a good and evil as prerogatives of the gods also associates good with the mysterious spiritual world and evil with the material world. I could steal $100. My theft would have an immediate material benefit, which is the money I stole. Or I could give someone $100, but my altruism would have no measurable benefit to me. Christ spoke on this topic, storing up your treasures in heaven. The idea being that this benefit resides in the spiritual realm. In other words, there is a benefit. It remains unseen to us here, but it is added to our ledger there. This suggests that we also have some tangible presence in this spiritual realm. We normally associate the spiritual realm with the realm of the gods, but there is another possibility that I'd like to explore here because it fits nicely into a simulation game. In our previous discussion, using the Adam and Eve story as an example, prior to the apple incident, there was no good or evil. After the apple, the Garden of Eden was split into two parts. There's the spiritual and the physical, as the venues for this good and evil theatre. In this context, our physical universe, the material realm, is only one part of this great game. What we define as the spiritual realm could be another part of the game, a part that we don't see. The definition of a physical world is that it has dimensions by which it can be measured, and so we could speculate that the spiritual world is a dimensionless world. There need not be any mass, space, or time there. Under this duality, there is a physical me here on earth and an ethereal me there. But both worlds are parts of the same simulation. And so while the real world is the world of the programmer, this great game itself could have many parts, of which our physical world is only one. And so this game could be played out on many levels. It'd be like playing five-dimensional chess.
私がいろんな次元領域にいるとすれば、この次元にいる私の行動はそのスピリチュアルな次元にどう影響してますか？
With everything we do, we are generating new information. My body is made up of electrons, atoms. And so just moving my hand generates a massive amount of new information at the quantum level and below. But in order to do this, to generate this information, I need a physical body and this physical world. But I don't need a physical world if I just want to store information. Oscar Wilde wrote a book called The Picture of Dorian Gray, in which Dorian made a pact with the devil where Dorian could live a life of debauchery but never age. Meanwhile, the real face of Dorian, what Dorian really looked like, was depicted on his portrait hanging on a wall. And so my information and not my physical body would be a portrait of that real me. And this portrait could be hanging on a wall in the spiritual realm. Our actions in the physical world generate information, which I suggest is why we're here. Let us suppose that I will live 80 years. That means that at age 40, I have generated half the information of my lifetime. I still have another half to generate. In other words, I'm daily in the process of making myself. Every day I'm adding more information to the me. I'm composing a symphony, and that symphony is me. And the very last thing I do, the very last note I play, will be that final piece of information. And then, and only then, I will be complete. The complete me could be the sum of every quanta of information I've ever generated. And so every thought I've ever had, every action I've ever made, from birth to death.
じゃあその過程をカルマと呼ぶことはできますか？
If all the information I collected during the years of my life is summed together into a single point after I die, then we could define that information point as the me. I'm now complete. As this would include both my good deeds and my bad deeds, whatever they may be, and if we assume that it's these deeds more than, say, the foods that I eat that will be defining me, then yes, we could call this the karma me.
この次元からスピリチュアルな世界に情報を送ることについて今お話ししてもらったんですけど、その逆についてはどう考えることができますか？
Well, we see clearly in this age of mass media how any event that is normally considered wrong, going to war for example, is preceded by a marketing campaign whose purpose is to dehumanize the other side, the enemy, who is then represented as evil, in order to justify the intended use of a terror, which itself is an evil but disguised as a good. That this is evidently necessary and important is seen by the huge resources devoted to such marketing campaigns. There can be 24-hour news cycles for months constantly repeating the same mantra. Now, if the spiritual realm is the principal domain, then arguably a battle in the heavens plays out before the violence on earth can begin. For the spiritual world, being dimensionless, cannot act physically. And this is what we're watching.
よく強い直感を感じてそれに従うようにしているんですけど、もし私たちの運命がこのゲームにつながっている場合、その自分の運命に関して目に見えない領域からガイダンスや助けを得ることは可能ですか？
I assume that this simulation, this great game, would break down if we knew the future. Imagine being in a casino, you would always win. The casino would eventually go bankrupt. But does that mean we cannot receive guidance? We all began as one cell, then two, then four, such that after 3 months we looked like a baby, and after 9 months we no longer needed mother, and so on. This process occurring according to our DNA. The information of that DNA could be stored on a flash drive. Relatively speaking, it's not a lot of information, but the information of that baby would exceed all the storage capacity on Earth. We can compress data, movies for example, compressing a 4 giga film into 800 megabytes for streaming. The universe, it seems, does the reverse. It has a decompression algorithm that can turn one cell into a complex person. This would be like taking a text message and decompressing it into a full-length movie. Now, if our universe is a simulation, then it began with some parameters. We could call these the DNA of the universe, such that after growing for 14 billion years via this decompression algorithm acting on that universe DNA, planet Earth is the result. But time hasn't stopped. This process continues. The universe growing larger and more complex second by second. And so, although we cannot know the future, this decompression algorithm is what is creating the future. Just as it has taken the universe from the Big Bang to the present. And so, can we surf this algorithm? From the perspective of the great plan of the universe itself, this could be called a manifest destiny, but it would not be measured in material benefits.
例えば友人に会うとか何かをしようと意図する動機は私自身の心から来ているように感じられるんですけど、もし私が単に神によってプログラムされたゲームの中にいる場合に私に自由意志はないっていうことになりますか？もしその何かしようってする動機が自由意志じゃないならこのゲームにはあんまり意味がないように感じられるんですけど。
This is the concept of intent. An AI computer won't spontaneously make coffee or write a book, and yet we do these things of our own volition. How does this work? It seems to me that nature itself is a problem-solving algorithm that uses an exchange of information. We see this in ant colonies, although I surmise that it works between electrons as well.
The answer goes all the way back to the birds and the bees, and fish and ants. All of these creatures have evolved methods of amplifying their intelligence by thinking together in systems. This is why birds flock and fish school and bees swarm. They are smarter together than alone. Now, I'm not talking about crowdsourcing like we humans do by taking votes and polls and surveys. I'm talking about forming systems, real-time systems with feedback loops so deeply interconnected that a new intelligence forms, an emergent intelligence with its own personality and intellect. I'm talking about forming a hive mind. Biologists call this swarm intelligence, and it's a natural step in the evolution of most social species. I like to think about it this way. A brain is a system of neurons so deeply connected that an intelligence forms. A swarm is a system of brains so deeply connected that a superintelligence forms. Simply put, a swarm is a brain of brains, and it can be smarter than any individual member.
If I run a weather simulation program on my laptop, it will take years to finish. If I run it on a supercomputer, it may take only hours. However, the output will be the same. The weather. If I put 100 ants together, they can solve a simple problem, find some food. However, a colony of ants together can solve complex problems. In other words, swarm intelligence is not about speed of processing, it is more about scaling up. If the neurons in my brain are using swarm intelligence, then I, with my 80 billion neuron brain, can solve more complex problems than can a cat with its 10 billion neuron brain. For this reason, I cannot understand how the cat thinks, nor can the cat understand how I think. Likewise, if I met an alien with a trillion neuron brain, that alien would see me as I see the cat. It could not comprehend my primitive thoughts. And so is a cat aware of itself when it looks in a mirror? Self-awareness, my conception of the me, may be built into the algorithm. And so my 80 billion neuron network brain would have a higher self-awareness than a cat, and the cat a higher self-awareness than a mouse. We could ask, what else could be built into the swarm intelligence algorithm? Could there be a sense of right and wrong? What we call a conscience? Could there be a desire for meaning or purpose? I mean, just how powerful could this algorithm be? As I speak, the neurons in my brain are working together to grow my thoughts, which are then converted into language, and the result is this discussion. And so it may be that I'm not a me, I'm a neuron colony swarm intelligence me. When I look at that jungle outside my window, I see different species working together, each with their own little niche. And so if we could extend this, then is there some total of life on Earth itself? A combined swarm intelligence. Perhaps planet Earth is alive.
最後に何かアドバイスはありますか？
Enjoy the game.